Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are looking at a really fascinating stack of sources. We've got some historical research, these deep cut articles on 19th century occultism, and our own notes centered around this pretty revolutionary text.
Right, Eliphas Levi's School of High Magic.
Exactly. Specifically, we're diving into Unit 2 of his curriculum, which is it is entirely about willpower. And our mission today is to completely dismantle what you probably think you know about magic.
Yeah, because usually, when we picture magic, there's this expectation of petitioning, basically.
Right. You picture I don't know, a medieval peasant writing a letter to a king or begging a spirit in the woods for a favor. You light a candle, you read from some spooky old grimoire, and you just sort of cross your fingers and hope the universe grants your wish.
I mean, that's the standard historical narrative of magic, right? It places the practitioner in a very passive stance. You are the subject, and the magic is this external supernatural force.
Like a deity or a demon.
Exactly, that you are just desperately hoping to appease. But when you step into the world of the 19th century occult revival, specifically through a figure like Levi, that entire dynamic just shatters.
Because you aren't writing a letter to a king anymore.
No, you discover that you have actually been sitting in the control room of a massive cosmic machine your entire life. You just, didn't realize you were the one holding the steering wheel.
Okay, let's unpack this, because shifting from begging demons in the woods to, sitting in a cosmic control room is a massive leap. Levi is essentially arguing that magic isn't a supernatural violation of natural law at all, right?
Right. It's not supernatural.
It's more of an engineering problem. Like, the human will isn't just a psychological trait to him, it's the sole engine of magic.
Yeah, and to understand that engineering problem, we first have to understand the specific machine we're operating. Levi calls the medium we are manipulating the universal agent, or the astral light.
The astral light.
Right. It helps to picture this as a subtle, invisible, cosmic fluid that it permeates absolutely everything. It acts as the bridge between pure, abstract intellect and dense physical matter.
Okay, but it's blind, right? Looking at the sources, that seems crucial.
It is the most crucial characteristic. It's completely blind, and it is highly plastic. It doesn't have a moral compass. It doesn't judge your intentions. It simply absorbs, amplifies, and reflects whatever human intent is habitually burned into it.
So if you're in the control room of this massive, highly plastic machine, the very first thing you need to figure out is, well, what kind of fuel you're going to use to run it.
Exactly.
And looking through our notes, Levi makes a really stark distinction between two states of being when a person tries to operate this machine. One is what he calls absolute superiority, and the other is passionate ecstasy.
Yeah, and the way he defines those terms requires a bit of surgical precision, because he's relying really heavily on their original roots.
Right, because when he says passionate ecstasy, he isn't talking about being in a romantic mood or just, having a heated temper.
No, not at all. He's looking at the Greek word ekstasis, which literally means a displacement or a standing outside of oneself. And he combines that with the Latin passio, which means to suffer or to endure.
Oh, wow. So it's a state of being acted upon. It's something that happens to you rather than something you are actively doing.
Right. It is an unregulated hemorrhage of energy.
Eh.
Operating out of passionate ecstasy means you're surrendering to desire. You are violently projecting your vital light into the astral light, like an unsteered cannonball.
Just sort of blasting your ego into the void.
Exactly. Absolute superiority, by contrast, implies a total centered containment. It's the architectural stability of an adept who remains safely inside their fortress, entirely unbothered, while they calmly direct the ambient tides of the universe.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Reading through Levi's framework, he actually admits that this passionate ecstasy, this cannonball of raw emotion, works.
Oh yeah, it achieves results.
It shoots out this massive burst of energy, and it can completely smash through a wall if you aim it hard enough. So I have to push back a little here. If the cannonball breaks through the obstacle and gets the job done, why is Levi calling it a structural vulnerability? Why is it a bad thing to blast through a wall if the wall is in your way?
Well, the fatal flaw of the cannonball becomes clear when we look at the Kabbalistic framework that Levi adapted for his theories. In Kabbalah, there's a concept called chokmah.
Okay.
And chokmah represents a raw, primordial, masculine flash of fire or pure force. But chokma is utterly destructive if it isn't caught and funneled into its counterpart, bina, which is the feminine vessel of form, structure, and severity.
Okay, hold on. Chokma and bina. Can we put that in plain English for a second? Like, what does it actually mean to funnel fire into structure?
Imagine holding a live explosive, right? The raw energy is phenomenal, but without a shaped charge like a dense casing that directs the blast exactly where you want it to go, that energy just radiates outward indiscriminately.
It just blows up everywhere.
Right. It destroys the target, but it also destroys the person holding it. The masculine force needs the feminine structure to become useful rather than, well, suicidal.
Oh, I see. So it's like a fire needing a fireplace. If you just have raw fire in the middle of your living room, it burns the house down. But if you have a structured stone vessel to contain it, it warms the whole building.
That is a perfect translation of the concept. Without the fireplace, that cannonball of the ego gets lost inside the obstacle. When you cast your will with violence and explosive passion, you're treating the external universe as a separate enemy that needs to be destroyed.
Rather than like a mirror of your own interior state that simply needs to be commanded.
Exactly. And the ultimate vulnerability of the cannonball is that you cannot steer it once it leaves the barrel.
And if I throw this unstructured, unsteered cannonball out into the astrolight, the universe isn't just a void that absorbs it forever, is it? Because the astrolight is a closed loop.
Right. It always snaps back to equilibrium.
So it bounces back.
The cosmic ricochet is inevitable. Because the astrolight is a reflective medium, we have to look at what actually happens when an operator uses bad magical hygiene, and that unsteered cannonball of passion bounces off the walls of reality and comes flying right back at them.
And Levi uses two highly specific classical myths to serve as like clinical diagnostics for this exact failure.
He does. The first is the tragedy of Hippolytus.
Right. Hippolytus, the son of Theseus from Greek mythology. He was famous for being a master horseman.
A virtuoso of the reins, supposedly in total control of his beasts. But Hippolytus suffered from an extreme, rigid obsession with a chilly brand of purity. He worshipped Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, and completely snubbed Aphrodite.
The goddess of love,
Yeah.
which, is never a good idea in these myths.
Never. He treated human passion with disgust. Aphrodite naturally takes her revenge. She curses Hippolytus' stepmother, Phaedra, with a maddening incestuous lust for him. When Hippolytus violently rejects her, Phaedra frames him for assault. This leads his father, Theseus, to curse his own son, using a divine favor owed to him by Poseidon, god of the sea.
And this is the moment where the operator completely loses control of the machine.
Exactly. As Hippolytus is driving his chariot along the rocky coast, fleeing his father's wrath, Poseidon sends a monstrous roaring sea bull erupting from the surf. Hippolytus' horses, the very beasts he thought he had perfectly mastered, catch the scent of this primordial monster.
And they bolt.
They bolt in a blind, terrified panic. Hippolytus gets tangled in his own reins, is dragged relentlessly over the jagged rocks, and is smashed to pieces.
Okay, breaking down the occult shorthand here, the horses represent our untamed animal appetites, right? The driving passions of the lower soul that we think we have under control until something massive spooks them.
Right. Hippolytus serves as a warning about internal currents. When you fling your vital light into the universal agent without the bit and bridle of a truly purified will, your own psychological currents will turn on you. You become the passive victim of your own momentum.
To ground this for you listening, it's like getting out of bed, grabbing your phone, and rage scrolling social media for an hour because you're stressed. You think you're just killing time or blowing off steam, but in Levi's framework, you are throwing these unsteered cannonballs of vital energy into the astral light.
That's a really good analogy.
You're letting your lowest, most panicked impulses drag you over the rocks for the rest of the day, all while tricking yourself into believing you're holding the reins.
The modern parallel is incredibly apt. And if Hippolytus represents the danger of your internal currents tearing you apart, Levi's second mythological example warns us about the external structures we build with that raw passion. This brings us to Phalaris.
Phalaris, the tyrant of Acragas in 6th century Sicily.
Right. Phalaris desired a monument to his own absolute dominance, something that would instill terror. So he commissioned an inventor to construct a hollow brass bull. It is an intricate torture device. You lock an enemy inside the bronze belly, light a roaring fire underneath it.
It has these pipes, right?
Yeah, an elaborate system of acoustic pipes in the bull's nostrils. They would convert the agonizing screams of the victim into the melodious bellowing of an angered beast.
Which is just deeply creatively messed up.
It is an acoustic nightmare. But occultly speaking, It is the perfect physical manifestation of a distorted imagination manipulating the world. Phalaris, who was cruel and capricious, decides to test the machine on the inventor himself, roasting him alive.
Wow.
But remember, the astral light is a closed loop of bouncing forces. You cannot escape the resonance of your own creations. Decades later, a rebellion finally overthrows Phalaris, and the mob decides on a very specific execution method for the tyrant.
Oh man, they throw him into his own brass bowl.
They throw him into the bull. Phalaris becomes the tenor in his own mechanical theater, howling through the nostrils of the very beast he engineered to torture others.
Is this essentially like a rogue programmer building an artificial intelligence out of pure malice or unrefined ego, and then being absolutely shocked when the architecture they built turns around and becomes their own sarcophagus?
The rogue AI analogy maps perfectly onto Levi's warning. Phalaris represents the structural blowback of a poorly insulated intention. The astral light remembers the shape of what you build.
So it doesn't just go away.
No, when you create an energetic engine out of raw, ego-driven desire, that machine acquires a terrible, unyielding autonomy. It doesn't care about your shifting regrets or your change of heart years down the line. It responds strictly to the energetic blueprint you originally impressed upon the universal agent. The creator is always destined to inhabit their own creation.
Okay, so if raw emotional passion is a cannonball that either drags you to death over the rocks from the inside or locks you inside a burning brass bowl from the outside, how do we actually avoid this? Like, how do we build this absolute superiority so we can steer the astral light without destroying ourselves?
The antidote to explosive emotion is relentless, agonizing habit. Levi introduces a concept he calls graduated gymnastics.
Basically, astral weight training.
The mechanism is identical to weight training. Levi is pulling heavily from Neoplatonic philosophy here. In plain terms, he views the human soul not as a static, unchangeable essence like a diamond that you're just born with, but as a highly malleable plastic substance.
It has to be forged.
Exactly. Just as you tear and rebuild physical muscle through constantly repeated physical exertion, you have to build the powers of the soul through repetitive psychic friction.
So if I'm understanding this, we have to let go of this cinematic idea of magic as this dramatic lightning bolt moment of inspiration on a mountaintop. We are talking about the grind.
The grind is the entire point. To Levi, the true cosmic enemies of the magician are not rival sorcerers or demonic entities hovering in the shadows. The enemies are laziness and forgetfulness.
Forgetfulness.
The Greeks called it lethe, this kind of spiritual amnesia where the soul forgets it is a sovereign fragment of the divine and simply surrenders to the dense, chaotic, downward drag of the material world. To combat this amnesia, you need constant resistance. And this brings us to one of the most brilliant parts of Levi's thesis, his radical redefinition of religion.
Yes. This part of the source material completely blew my mind. He basically strips away all the theology, all the debates about morality, and looks at the church as this giant humming piece of occult machinery.
He argues that the elaborate, exhausting, painstakingly boring rituals of the ancient world, and specifically the Catholic Church he was raised in, were never actually about pleasing and demanding God. They were deliberately designed as a form of macro-level spiritual gymnastics.
So when Levi looks at the Pope, he doesn't see divine right. He says the Pope only has power in the world because somewhere in some forgotten, freezing rural parish, there is an anonymous priest waking up every single day and forcing himself to recite agonizingly boring daily prayers, even when he doesn't want to.
The collective friction of those daily prayers powers the entire structure. Occultists refer to this kind of structure as an egregore. It's an autonomous, energetic construct kept alive entirely by the rhythmic daily focus of thousands or millions of humans.
Egregore. Is that like how money only has value? Because we all wake up every day and agree that it does. Like the stock market or fiat currency is essentially an egregore because our shared habitual belief is the battery keeping it alive.
The stock market is a phenomenal example of a modern egregore. It has no physical substance, yet it dictates global reality solely because human attention continually feeds it. In Levi's view, the church operates the same way. The believer demands the mass demands the priest demands the pope. The macrocosmic structure survives entirely because its microcosmic components refuse to let it drop.
Okay, I have to push back here just to make sure I'm getting the sheer scale of what he's claiming. Levi is saying the theological dogmas, the specific holy words they're chanting, the incense, the stained glass, none of that objective material inherently matters.
That's right.
It's literally just the psychological friction of forcing yourself to do something incredibly difficult every single day that builds the magical muscle.
Difficulty itself is the magic. If you don't deliberately strain your psychic mechanism against an obstacle, the will remains flaccid. It has no density, and therefore it cannot direct the universal agent. Levi is salvaging the functional core of religion from the theologians.
Interesting.
He's saying the external apparatus of religion is actually a massive historical flywheel designed to store and concentrate human intentionality.
Okay, let's take away the giant institution. Let's look at what this looks like for one single isolated person. Because if the objective material truly doesn't matter and only the internal friction matters, Levi gives us this amazing, highly specific example of a peasant in a field to prove it.
By stripping the sacerdotal art down to its barest engine, Levi gives us a purely mechanical look at willpower. He describes a solitary peasant who wakes up at 2 or 3 in the morning, leaves his warm bed, and walks far from his home in the freezing dark, just to pick a single sprig of a specific herb before the sun rises.
And Levi boldly claims that while carrying that mundane herb, this peasant could perform miracles.
Right.
But again, not because the herb itself is magical.
The herb possesses absolutely no objective magical or chemical properties. It is a weed.
So what is actually happening? Why is he torturing himself to go get it?
2 crucial things are happening. First, the temporality. He is operating in the pre-dawn darkness. In the occult framework, the ambient cosmic currents during the night are fluid and unpolarized by the sun, making the astral light highly receptive to impression.
Okay.
Second, the herb undergoes what we might call a semiotic transubstantiation. It becomes a dense physical anchor for his focused intent.
Whoa. Semiotic transubstantiation is a massive mouthful. Are you basically saying the herb goes from being a random, meaningless plant to acting like a physical USB drive that holds all the data of his focused willpower?
The USB drive is exactly what it becomes. The intense effort, the literal physical torment of walking in the freezing dark, gives the peasant's idea ontological weight. It makes the thought heavy enough to dent reality.
Yeah.
And the most important part of this equation is the utter uselessness of the act.
Uselessness.
Yes, the absurdity is what isolates his will from mere economic utility. If he was picking the herb to sell it at the market for breakfast, the action would be diluted by necessity. But because he does it for absolutely no logical reason, the path itself becomes a consecration.
This connects so perfectly to modern life. So this is like having a grueling morning routine, say, waking up at 4 a.m. every day to take a freezing cold plunge and meditate in silence. But instead of doing it for productivity or to be a more efficient CEO or to make more money, you are doing it for absolutely no logical reason other than to prove to the universe that your will is the first cause.
The distinction between necessity and sovereignty is everything here. If you take the ice bath to improve your circulation, biology is driving the bus. If you take the ice bath solely because you willed it against every scream of your physical comfort, then the will itself becomes the primary engine.
That makes total sense.
The peasant, just like the person in the 4 a.m. ice bath, is performing alchemy on his own mind. He is hardening his ego shell, turning a fragile, fleeting human whim into an unbending cosmic decree.
Okay, so we've established the danger of the cannonball, that passionate ecstasy that ruins you. We've established the cure, the graduated gymnastics, the grueling daily habits that forge the density of the will. Now we have to talk about the payload. What does this internal technology actually do when you finally unleash it? Because looking at the notes, it leads to a complete redefinition of a word we throw around casually all the time: faith.
Levi insists we must look past the modern, soft-headed, culturally diluted reading of this word. If we look at the original Greek, the word is pistis, in Latin, fides. In its esoteric context, faith is not passive intellectual assent. It is not a whimpering hope that things will work out if you just believe hard enough.
It's an ironclad trust.
It is absolute certitude. And the mechanical reality of that certitude is that it translates immediately into action. There's no temporal lag between the thought and the manifestation. The act and the belief are born as twins. Levi gives this brilliant domestic vignette to explain the psychology of this. He notes that when a child says, "I can't," a mother typically responds by saying, "Try."
Wait, I'm a bit lost on this one. If a kid is struggling with something, a mom telling them to try is a good supportive thing. Why is Levi saying that's an example of bad magic?
Because trying inherently acknowledges the existence of an obstacle. Think about the psychology of the word try. It introduces a fatal crack in the magician's psychic armature, because trying implies the possibility of failure. True magical faith does not try.
It just does it.
It simply does. If you are trying, you are fighting the universe. Faith works calmly because it operates from a place that assumes omnipotence is already at its command and eternity is laid out before it.
So, what does this all mean? We've contrasted the cannonball of passion from the beginning of our deep dive, that explosive, unpredictable force that destroys you, with this fully trained, unbothered will. And Levi compares that trained will to the tide.
The tide is the ultimate Neoplatonic metaphor for this kind of power. It represents a macrocosmic, unstoppable rhythm. The trained will is patient. It simply eats away at iron without ever appearing to strain. If you are watching the clock sweating, wondering if your magic is working yet, you are doubting the mechanism. You are stuck in temporal anxiety.
Which is the opposite of absolute superiority.
Right. The tide doesn't worry about the iron gate blocking the harbor. It just relentlessly, cyclically washes over it until the iron rusts, crumbles, and is gone.
It's the difference between hoping for a miracle and possessing a chilling, preemptive certainty that the thing is already done. We've moved entirely from being desperate petitioners begging for table scraps from the universe to becoming sovereign engineers calmly directing natural forces from the control room.
That realization is the true arcanum of initiation. There is no rigid separation between the internal mind and the external world. The astral light is just waiting for you to stop reacting to it with passionate ecstasy and to start structuring it with absolute superiority.
Which brings us to the great takeaway for you listening from Levi's School of High Magic. This text isn't about learning a secret spell to make someone fall in love with you or to find hidden gold in the woods. The ultimate secret is that true magical potency is completely indistinguishable from total self-mastery. The actual magic is the psychological muscle you build while you think you're just torturing yourself by picking an herb in the freezing dark.
And that leaves us with a very practical, if somewhat unsettling, reality check to ponder. We've established today that the astrolite is a blind plastic medium. It records and bounces back every single habitual action and intent we burn into it, whether we are doing it consciously or entirely by accident.
Right.
So if your daily habits are literally the architectural blueprints for your reality, you have to ask yourself, what kind of autonomous, invisible architecture are your unconscious habits building for you right now? Are your daily routines forging a sanctuary of absolute superiority? Or are you slowly, day by day, building your own brass bowl?
Something to seriously think about the next time you find yourself reacting instead of directing. Thanks for joining us in the control room for this deep dive. See you next time.
3 in the morning, frost on the field, hands full of silence, nothing revealed.